Hello, I'm Michelle and welcome to Somewhere in Bookland. Today I'm going to be talking about all the books I bought in the month of September. At the beginning of September, Barnes & Noble was having this huge book sale where some books were 50% off. And if you have a member card, then you would take an additional 10% off after the 50%. I do have a member card. This sounded enticing, so I had to go look. And I ended up picking two books up from there, and those two books were The Poppy War by R.F. Kuang and Smoke in the Sun by Renee Ahdieh. Now I wanted to pick up The Poppy War because I had been seeing a lot about it on Twitter. This book is a fantasy about this girl, Rin, who passes an empire-wide test to find the most talented youth to learn at the academies. And it's a surprise to everyone, including herself, that she passes the test, as she is a war orphan from the Rooster Providence. Not only does she pass the test, but she gets into the most elite military school that is available. But going there as a dark-skinned peasant girl isn't the easiest thing. She gets targeted by rivals because of her race, because of her class, and because she's a girl. She discovers a power within herself might actually end up being one of the only things that can save her people from a third Poppy War. I've heard that this book is very dark and gritty and hard to read, but I'm very excited to read it. The second book that I picked up, Smoke in the Sun by Renee Ahdieh, is the second book in the Flame in the Mist series. And since it's the second book, I don't want to go into too much detail about what this book is about, because I don't want to spoil anything, but I really enjoyed the first book and I knew I had to pick up the second book. The first book, Flame in the Mist by Renee Ahdieh, kept getting touted as kind of like a Mulan retelling when it first came out, and while I can see why some might say that, it's not exactly a retelling, it just has some aspects in common. This book follows the only daughter of a prominent samurai, who ends up being the target of a vicious attack from the Black Clan, a dangerous group of bandits. So Maruko goes undercover as a boy and infiltrates the Black Clan to get her revenge. But doing so just causes more questions to arise. And she starts to question whether or not the Black Clan might really be as bad as everybody thinks. The next book I got is actually a graphic novel, and that is the fourth and final volume in I Hate Fairyland. This one's called Sadly Never After. The I Hate Fairyland series is by far my favorite graphic novel series, and to be holding the conclusion made me sad when I bought it. I have already read this, and I have some feelings about it that I will talk about in my wrap-up. But I highly recommend this series. This series is about this girl Gertrude who gets whisked away to Fairyland, and in order to make it home she has to find a key and find her way back. But she can't. She's actually very bad at following that task, and she ends up being there for over 30 years. And while her body doesn't age, her mind does, and she grows to resent it and basically becomes like a murderer while trying to figure out where the key is and how she can get home. I love this series. I love the colorfulness of the art. I just think this whole series is just amazing, and I highly recommend it. The next book I got, I've been wanting to buy for a while, ever since I heard somebody talking about it on their BookTube channel. I can't remember who I heard talking about it, but it just sounded so interesting, and that is Space Opera by Catherine M. Valente. Now this book is literally a space opera. This book takes place a century after a war that tore the whole galaxy apart, and ever since then there's been this huge galaxy-wide competition where they sing and dance. It's basically a huge talent show. And humans have finally discovered the greater stretch of the galaxy, and they're expected to compete in this talent show. It is not a choice. It is a requirement. And from the sounds I'm taking on it, if you don't compete or don't win or don't do good, something bad happens. And I just thought this sounded really interesting. So I'm super excited to read this one. The next book I got in the month of September, I actually won on Goodreads, and that is The Brilliant Death by Amy Rose Capita. This book is a fantasy about Theodora, a mafia don's daughter, who secretly wields the power to turn her family's enemies into trinkets. Then the land's new ruler decides to set out and destroy the 5 families that have been ruling the land for a while, and her own father is one of those heads of families, and he becomes gravely ill, and it's up to Theodora to save him. And so in doing that, she travels to the capital, not just disguised as a boy, but completely transformed into one. She travels with Celio, who can switch back and forth between male and female, and feelings start to grow, and it just sounds like such a good book, and I was so happy to have won it. And it comes out on the 30th of October. The next 2 books I won from the author on Twitter, and it is the first 2 books in the Sea of Ink and Gold trilogy by Tracy Chee, and that is The Reader and The Speaker. Now, the coolest thing about these is I also got to choose 5 chapters from each book for her to annotate. And so they came with just notes that she wrote in the book, which I thought was super cool. Now, The Reader is about this girl, Sephia, whose father is brutally murdered, and she has to go live with her aunt, who teaches her skills like hunting, tracking, and stealing. But then her aunt is kidnapped, and none of those skills can help track her aunt down. With the help of a stranger, and the only thing left behind by her father when he was murdered, a book, she ends up setting out on a mission to rescue her aunt and discover the identity of her father's killer. I think this book sounds really exciting, and now I have the first 2 books that I can binge, and I believe the 3rd book is already out, or if not, is coming out very soon. Like I said, I think it's really cool that it has the annotations. Some of them just talk about different foreshadowing or different things that she mentions in this and then maybe brings back up in the 2nd book. And then there's like some little doodles in here, and it's just really cool. Also, she has really nice handwriting, and like it looks like it was printed on. It's just really nice handwriting. Anyways, those are the 7 books I bought or received in the month of September, and that's all I gotta say. Like this video if you like it, click subscribe if you want to see more of this face in your feed, and I'll see you guys later. Bye.